Hey everyone, I hope everybody's doing well. So, for this semester, I decided to do the Inner Game of Music for my book review. This book was written by Barry Green, but the original book was written by Timothy Gallwey, and it is called The Inner Game of Tennis, which I have not read, but I know that Barry Green reached out to Timothy Gallwey and was like, hey, I really enjoy this. I'm a bass player. Do you think maybe we could do this for musicians specifically? And a lot of people, I think he said at Juilliard, use this book to help them practice and motivate them to do things. So it's a good read, and we'll get into that later. But he starts off, and often throughout the book, with concepts of psychology and not just the type of verbiage that might confuse you if you're not a psychology major or somebody who's mega into science. He talks about it in a way that is very easy to follow. And he starts with the concept of performance. As musicians, that's what we care the most about, right? Because often in the real world, your performance is how much you get paid, and people see your performances. That's the product that you're putting out into the world. So he says that the equation that you should use to calculate your performance is performance equals potential minus interference. And we've all experienced interference. I have experienced interference. Interference is when your brain basically just gets in the way because you're nervous or because you're feeling other things or you're distracted by other things. You have all this interference that's basically messing with your A game and it's throwing you off. And this interference might even be stage fright for some people, right? Being in front of an audience, that could be another thing that interferes. So he then moves on to a concept that I love and a concept that I didn't even know came from this book because I was taught it in high school. So I thought it was cool coming back to the concept and where it originated from. But he talks about self 1 and self 2, which I learned as guy 1 and guy 2. So this concept is an incredible concept where he talks about your self 1 being the front man basically of your mind. So everything that you're thinking on a daily basis, like, oh, I have to get through this task. Oh, I have to do this thing. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. I'm going to mess up this performance probably. That's self 1. Self 1 is the big talker. He talks big game. That is your self 1. Self 2 is basically all of your automated responses to things that happen. It's the back burner. It's the things that you don't really think about. For example, sometimes you might find yourself playing a piece and you're like, wow, I didn't even know that I could just play that piece from memory. Or you'll perform something and you'll blank out and be like, I don't remember this. How did I even get through it? You got through it because of self 2. Self 2 helped you push through. So he encourages people to work on not necessarily silencing their self 1, but satiating it. And to satiate your self 1, he encourages people to focus on awareness and goals. For awareness, this doesn't mean to just be hyper aware of what you're playing or be so caught up in the moment. He actually wants you to be aware of the ensemble you're playing with or something else that isn't correlated to the music. He wants you to focus on being in the moment. So when you watch those great performers and they look like they're really into it, that's what he's hoping to do. But he focuses on how you should shape your mind to think, the types of questions you should be asking yourself, which is like, oh, how do I feel when I play this piece? What story comes to my mind when I'm thinking of this piece? What do I want the audience to get from this piece? Because music is communication, and he says in this book that all we're doing is communicating the message of what the composer wanted to communicate originally when they wrote it. I believe he used an example of Beethoven, and I liked the way he explained this concept because he was like, well, I want you to imagine that you're Beethoven and you're losing your hearing and you're so frustrated because you're losing your hearing and you're a musician and you're losing the one thing that is greatly contributing to the art that you are doing. And I just thought, wow, because how often do we play pieces and have this deeper meaning? We are exposed to a lot of literature and we do get the meanings, but we do we sit down and think about how that person must have felt. I just thought that was a very cool connection, and I thought it was really interesting. Another concept that he harps on in here, towards the end of the book, albeit, but I found that it was very, very important and very, very insightful. I've been applying a lot of these concepts throughout my time in my second semester as I was reading the book. But when I got to this chapter specifically, I thought, wow, I think everybody needs to read that. He spoke about ensemble playing. And you might think, okay, I get my solo performance, I get this. Why would he focus on the inner game of music with ensemble playing? But the way that he approached it was so incredible. And he spoke on something I'm sure a lot of us first years have experienced, but even going up to the seniors and the juniors and the sophomores, it's something that everybody's experienced, where you start to fall out of love with music. And he does talk about this in the solo sense of individuals, encouraging us to continue going back and finding what made us interested in this in the first place. But when he talks about ensemble playing specifically, he talks about the fact that we've all had this moment where we came into the thing and we thought, wow, this is so amazing. And it's often people's freshman year of high school or like their freshman year of college, where they're like, this was the greatest thing ever and nothing gets better than this thing. That mindset often leads to people falling out of love when things start changing, and when that moment in your head is gone. And he gives you strategies to work around that. He talks about, trying to adopt the mentality of the composer that you have, or not the composer, the conductor that you have, which is hard. And he talks about both good examples and really bad examples, or like kind of neutral examples, because every conductor has a different approach and it affects you. But what also affects you is the people that you work with. And sometimes you might not have as much fun as you did with a certain ensemble. And maybe it's not necessarily that. Maybe it's the fact that it's hard for you to work with certain people. But he talks about it in a very professional sense and gives you strategies to essentially work with and through the difficult times, which I thought was pretty amazing. And I had to call myself out a little bit, because I definitely think I've been guilty of that mindset for sure, where I wonder where my amazement went. And now getting onto the most personal side of this review, I felt called out in a lot of ways when I read this book, because there were many things that I was experiencing that I didn't realize were affecting the way that I was performing, and affecting the way that I was performing and perceiving music. And it kind of lit this fire under me where I was like, wow, I need to do everything at once, which is not the solution necessarily, right? Because that leads to burnout, which leads to the same feeling of feeling like you don't know what you're doing, essentially. But reading this book throughout my semester and applying the concepts, trying to be aware in rehearsals, trying to come with a mindset that I am exposing myself to literature that is explaining a story. I am storytelling. I am a storyteller. I am working with people for one common goal, and that is to make music. And it's a good thing, and it's a privilege, because how many people can say that they get to do music for a living, right? It's a privilege in itself. And it lit a fire under me trying to think of psychology concepts. And again, you don't have to be a big psychology nerd to love this book. But he gets you out of this mindset that you are unusual because you feel a certain way, or because you have these blocks, or you ask these questions to yourself. And it might seem taboo as a musician to ask these questions, but he doesn't shy away from it at all. And he is a teacher, so it makes sense. I would definitely give this book a read. There's so much good stuff in here, and I don't have enough time to talk about it all. But please, 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 if nothing else, and it's not that long, this book is well loved, and I really think you should give it a read at some point. Have a good night, everybody.